Cars. No, not you, Lightning. These cars. You know, the things that get you to school, work, or wherever you want to go. It's near impossible to go anywhere in the US without seeing something car-related, be that roads, highways, or parking lots. Cars play a large part in US culture and are sold as tokens of freedom and essential to day-to-day life. But what if I were to tell you that despite the narrative, cars in fact limit people's everyday freedoms by restricting their options for transit and diminishing the amount of space dedicated for pedestrians? To break down how the US ended up in this situation, let's first examine some history. The integration of cars into the US caused a variety of drastic changes to the modern city. Firstly, it oversaw the creation and expansion of roads and highways. This meant that cities decreased in density over time because of the increased demand for vehicular space. Secondly, it oversaw the transition from public transit, like early 19th century streetcars, towards individual vehicular ownership. This increased demand for larger roads and introduced a new dilemma: parking. According to Business Insider, in the US alone there are over 2 billion parking spots, 6 for each registered car. Much of this space could otherwise be occupied by housing, something many cities are in desperate need of, or public spaces that make the environment less hostile to civilians. Highways also played a crucial part in establishing the car as the primary mode of transportation in the U.S. With the introduction of the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act, signed by President Eisenhower in 1956, interstate highways were constructed that allowed people to more easily exit the city. This construction of highways, many of which cut through entire cities, led to both the demolishing of residential buildings, but also the division of neighborhoods from the rest of the city. A prime example of this division comes with Lawrence Kriesman's The Evolution of King County, where Kriesman details how the construction of I-5, made possible by the Highways Act, quote, divided communities and destroyed residential buildings that knit communities together. This caused irreversible harm to the residents, who were cut off from the rest of the city, making it significantly more difficult for people to get their basic needs without driving. Though this was a nuisance for the majority white neighborhood that was divided by I-5, many communities of color were never able to recover from the destruction of their community. The construction of highways often targeted historically black neighborhoods, segregating them from the white sides of the city. One of the most famous examples of this is explained by The Guardian, who details how in the 1960s, I-81 divided a historically black neighborhood in Syracuse, destroying housing in the city to cater to white people who had fled to the suburbs but still needed to commute to work. This not only divides the community, but causes physical harm to the residents who are on the receiving end of pollution created by passing cars. This is pollution created by both the gas that powers the cars, but also by the loud noise that a symphony of cars make. The popularization of suburbia has drastically increased the distance between housing and stores that provide basic necessities like grocery stores and pharmacies. Not to mention that they have increased the danger that pedestrians take on when they need to walk or bike to basic places. This focus unnecessarily puts people in harm's way. Although many cities have made some changes to add bike lanes and expand sidewalks, roads in the US still cater towards the audience of people that own a vehicle. Cars are very vulnerable to human error, and as such, pose a much larger danger to a pedestrian than a bus or a bike. By continuously adding cars to the streets, cities in the US are making places much harder to exist in for someone who wants to walk or bike to their destination. One of the biggest implications for such extreme changes to car-centric infrastructure is highlighted in the amount of money necessary to own a car. This includes costs like insurance, gas, and any other maintenance required. According to the New York Times, the average cost of owning a car per year is around $12,000, or $1,000 a month. These are costs that can be brought down by a more pedestrian-centric system. Another massive implication of a car-centric system is pollution. The U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that the U.S. is responsible for 1,488 million metric tons of CO2 from motor gasoline and diesel. This not only contributes significantly to rising temperatures, but also can cause respiratory illness like asthma in people who are frequently exposed to pollution. Finally, personal health is severely impacted by a car-centric system. Cities for People by Jan Gehl describes the hostility of modern cities towards pedestrians. This comes almost entirely as a result of an increased emphasis on cars. More specifically, Gell describes how reliance on cars has led people to lead unhealthier lives. If more people felt safe enough to walk or bike around a city, then they would have more opportunities to improve their personal health rather than taking the convenient option of transportation to drive. Despite the drawbacks laid out in this video, there are many who still say that the US would be worse off without cars being the main source of transportation. More specifically, one of the main complaints that people bring up when road shrinkage is discussed is congestion. In other words, people are concerned that by taking away lanes for cars or parking spaces, it will cause more traffic and increase commuting time. In practice, this is not the case. When road closures occur, people are more likely to seek out alternate forms of transportation like buses, light rail, biking, or walking. All the while, expansions or construction of highways leads to a proportional increase in the people using their car as their primary mode of transportation. This is supported by the construction of Interstate 5 by Bay Christine and Associates, as they describe how since the construction of I-5 it has only had minor improvements. In other words, I-5 today was designed for 1975 traffic volumes. This suggests that traffic has maintained at least somewhat steady for almost 50 years, despite the fact that the population of potential drivers has grown since then. That is to say that congestion does not change substantially if the road is expanded or condensed. Another complaint that is often raised in support of car-centric infrastructure is that public transport is either too indirect or too expensive to get somewhere. To this, I would say that if more money was redirected from highway subsidization to public transportation, then more unique bus lines could run in order to get from one place to the next. Assuming more people frequented public transit as opposed to driving their cars, traffic would be much less of an issue, allowing buses to get you to your destination much faster than each individual having a car. In conjunction with this, bus lines could run more frequently to mitigate the increased demand. In addition, money reallocated from car subsidies could make this transit free for anyone who wanted to ride, discouraging more people from using their cars and increasing the efficiency of public transit. Despite popular opinion in the US, cars are not the only option for transit. In fact, there are many more sustainable and more efficient methods of transit. Overall, even if everyone wanted it, car-centric infrastructure will not be changed quickly or efficiently. But in order for the US to improve people's health, housing, and cost of living, it ought to start now. Oh, and sorry, Lightning, I think the sequel to Cars movie may just be buses and trains.